everybody. We are super excited today to be live with not only a trail runner and not only a painter, hello to Mexico, but a trail running painter. So, Bruce, I will let you introduce yourself in case anybody here hasn't already seen some of your work that we've been sharing recently. Hey, Henry. We're going to be talking to Bruce about the connections that he sees between trail running and painting, both in terms of the emotional benefits, the mental benefits, but also the cool way of combining something artistic like painting with his passion for the sport of trail running. So Bruce, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, hey, my name is Bruce Katlin with a K, and thank you so much for doing this with me at Goals. I'm in New Mexico. Behind me, we're in the mountains of New Mexico. And before I came here 7 years ago, this is like a 40-year dream uh, to live in the mountains of New Mexico. I lived in Colorado for a long time, where I started skiing and taught Dustin Hoffman how to ski,
No
and
way.
went to New York. Yeah, and I said, I want to do what you do. I'll tell you, this go real quick loop here, 2 minutes. And I said, I want to do what you do. And he said, well, you have to go back to the East Coast and live in New York. So I went to New York and became an actor, writer, director, and producer, and had a modicum of success. And I got to a point when I was around 40, was tired of I created my own one-man show of 14 characters, and I was able to make a little bit of money, but I realized somebody said to me, don't you want to have health insurance? I said, yeah, I guess that's a good idea. So I went to work, and someone said to me, why don't you leverage your skills of writing and creating and mentoring and teaching into corporate learning and development? And I did, and that took off, and I still do a little bit of that. But anyway, long story short, I ended up moving to Chicago to take another job, and could only stand 4 years of the winter there. But when I got there, I said, it's been a long time since I picked up the paint and brush, and I really miss this. So I started doing it and started taking online classes again, and that slowly got me back into doing what I'm doing. And then I read the famous videographer that really brought skiing into the mainstream in the 70s, did a thing on Taos and New Mexico skiing. And I said, I got to go there one day. And I came here strictly to paint. Mm-hmm. And I could do that just for 2 years. And then I ran out of money. So I went back and I started teaching skiing again and painting and selling paintings. But then I realized, and here's the thing, is when I was in the studio, especially coming from cities like New York and Chicago, I kept saying, I'm in this beautiful area and I don't want to be inside in the studio and paint. I got to get outside. And then I'd be running and I'd say to myself, because I don't know if you guys do this, is like, I should be shitting all over myself. I should be back in the studio painting. I go, wait a second, you idiot. Why don't you just do the same together? So I did. I put them together and I started in a very clumsy, way too much heavy. I was carrying 125 pounds of equipment. I only weigh 120. Only weigh 127 pounds. So, because I'm really tiny, I'm only about 5'4" and shrinking, by the way. And so slowly but surely, I started getting this technique down to lower the painting weight, but also, and I can only paint while I run. By the way, I don't want you to think I'm some kind of like special human being, because I'm not. There's no way to paint going downhill. It's way too dangerous, as you know. So I could paint going uphill, but most of the stuff that I did was I would run. I would videotape a lot. This is why I don't do too many. It's so much work, as you know. But here's what I found. I don't like, and never have been wired to or cultured or learned culturally to think pragmatically. I don't like it. I just want to throw paint on there. I just want to do it. Now, I realized that I was going to have to find a way, the short circuit, which we talk about a lot in the past, and we don't do so much now, left and right brain thinking. They all work together now. There is a left and there is a right. And I'm not an expert, but I've studied neuroscience, and I work with several physicians from the Mayo Clinic and also the University of Norway, who's done some study on divergent thinking and aerobic exercise, which is pretty interesting. Kind of the one thing we all know is like that runner's high, but there's so many other brain functions that are being affected when we run, and we're creating a lot of neuroplasticity. I realized like after a really long run, when I painted, I did not notice the pragmatic part anymore. It was flowing, and it's kind of like, I guess, best analogy is Zen-like, that flow that we're in. So I realized when I was up there, like, I remember I can still feel it now, the first time going, you're like run and think you notice when you're not on the ground, when both feet are lifted for a second, and you go, wow, that is amazing. And then as soon as you notice, you're out of it again, right? Because then that conscious mind takes over. Mm-hmm. So I realized this is it. This is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to torture myself anymore, whether I'm inside or outside. I'm going to do the both. I'm going to put them both together and run in pain. But that was euphoria when I felt that. Yeah. And putting those two things together.
Yeah. So can you tell us I think that the best way that people can understand what you do is maybe by watching some of your YouTube videos, but can you just walk through a general a paint run for you? I'm not sure if that's the right term that you would use, but what does that look like in terms of what you take with you, how you move, how do you begin painting, at what point, how do you choose where you're going to stop? Do you choose that in advance, or do you decide along the way, like, oh, this is definitely the place? Can you give us just a look into what that looks like for you? And my phone, we're on Instagram, my phone is running a bit low, so I'm gonna have to probably step away and plug it in for a second. This is sucking all of my
No worries. Well, that's a great question, and the answer would be to all of that is kind of both. Is sometimes I pick, and if you go on to either my website or the Running Artist YouTube channel, and you'll see a bunch of running to paint videos. Some of them I know, especially in the beginning when I moved here in 2014, I knew there were specific spots in the Wheeler Peak Wilderness. That's our highest peak. And I knew there was old camps up there, so there was carrying, is getting everything. Okay, so I know where I want to go. I was a Boy Scout, so I always carry probably more than I need, but now I slimmed it down to just enough. So first of all, it's the safety stuff. So I'm carrying a locator. So I then determine, this is a hard thing for me, is how much paint to take. I like using a lot of paint. I like throwing it on, and I like wet on wet painting, which is, some painters like to use quick dry so they can move on. I don't. I like mixing my paints right on the board. I only paint on wood. I don't like canvas. It's too bouncy for me. I know other artists think I'm nuts, but it makes it heavier. And then I take hooks and I screw them into the back. I push them through the envelope. You can see all this. Close it, tie it, wrap it, and put it on the back. And then I usually take one tripod. Okay. And then go that way. There are sometimes, this is really good because you reminded me to go to new places and not have a planned destination. I've a couple times stopped short of a destination and said, well, that's just too beautiful to pass up. I'm going to paint that instead. So it's a little bit of both.
Okay. Yeah, that was actually the question that my other co-founder, Moises, had last night when we were talking about you and what you do. He said that for him as a trail runner and an ultra runner, I mean, like, he's a professional trail runner, so when he's training, it's really serious. But he said even for him, so many times, like, he'll be in the process of doing a run or doing a training, and he's like, it's just impossible to not stop and take photos. And every minute you run farther, the more beautiful it is. And his main question that he wanted me to ask you on his behalf was basically exactly that. Like, kind of, do you ever hit a point where you're like, okay, no, this is definitely the spot because it's too beautiful, and you just stop there,
Yeah, this is something I don't think I do enough, and my runner friends that I know don't do. We go and we run, and then we forget about what got us into running in the first place. You don't stop long enough. I was running up in the hills behind me, which are just foothills. They're not very high. It's about 8,000 feet. And I was like, I'm not doing it. Life, especially now, what we're all going through right now, with the pandemic and with geopolitical debates and what side you're on, it doesn't really matter. It's stressful. And I'm not going to just keep running to run. It's just the journey to me is much more important right now than that destination. Yeah. I'm learning finally, after close to 63 years on this planet, that just slow down. Being and meditating is doing something. Taking a picture is doing something, as is running. Yeah. So we can look back. I can say on my gravestone, he never stopped running. So what? Like, what did I get out of it? How many people did I help? What beautiful paintings did I contribute to the world that
Mm.
made somebody happy? Story. I'm not.
Yeah, I think though this is something that with Vert we've been talking about amongst ourselves, the three of us, Max Moises and myself, who are behind Vert. I mean, especially since the pandemic started, this idea of why do we train, right? And I think that a lot of people, like you're saying, they get into running for a specific reason, and then we get hooked on races or competition, and we just forget
Mm-hmm.
that we forget the reason we started running in the first place. And I think especially
Yep.
for trail runners, the reasons are frequently for mental health benefits, to be outside because of the community. And I think kind of these past 6 or however many months we've been in this COVID situation, at least for the three of us, we've had to kind of redefine why we trail run and why we train,
Yep.
even, this idea
Mm-hmm.
that, like, well, we train so that we're stronger, so we can spend more time out in these beautiful places, so that we can spend more time in nature. Not like, oh, we train so that we can toe the start line of this particular race, which obviously is motivating, but it's kind of just kind of along the same lines, redefining, okay, so why do I train? It's like, oh, it's to get, because my legs are stronger and I can get to these cool places. So I think that also kind of goes hand in hand a little bit.
So what do you guys come up with? I mean, have you defined, besides the strengthening issue, of why you run?
I think for each person it's different. Me personally, it's definitely related to my mental health. For me, running is, it gives me structure. I've never been a person who, I mean, it's not that I don't enjoy the run itself. I mean, I think with trail running, it's hard to not enjoy the run because it's just beautiful. But for
Mm-hmm.
me, running is 100% connected to my mental health. And for me, I function better. I'm a happier person.
Right.
That for me, that's definitely why. I've never been a race type of person. I did one trail 21K once, but for me, races have never been a huge driving factor, so I don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily miss that aspect. I am missing the community aspect this year. That's been pretty
Yes.
tough. Yeah, but I think for each person it's a bit different. My other two co-founders would probably answer differently, but for me, it's my why of running is definitely connected to mental health, and that's something that I also wanted to talk to you about, because I think one of the things I found the most interesting about your combining trail running with painting is this idea that for you, you found it to be even more stimulating in positive mental ways than just trail
Mm-hmm.
running alone or just painting alone.
Mm-hmm.
Can you maybe talk a little bit about that? Maybe how you discovered that or how it makes you feel?
Yeah, I'm glad as you talked about that, about mental health. So, I, my mother was suffered her entire life with mental illness. She was really so painful to watch her go through, especially as I got older. And it was a very, very challenging household. And not until became an adult, became aware of who I was, did I realize how much this poor woman was suffering.
Yeah.
So, and I think she's passed that on to. I from a from about 12 years old, I suffered severe anxiety.
Mm.
Around 16, I was almost agoraphobic,
Okay.
meaning I couldn't leave the house
Okay.
because I was too anxious prone. I thought, and it did work for a while, drugs and alcohol worked for a while. So the only outlet I had, and the only thing I thought I was really good at, was sports,
Mm.
because I could just go out and do it. So I didn't take the traditional route. I didn't go to university right away. I didn't go back to school till I was 40. After 9/11, if you look at the statistics, a lot of people got into running and marathon running. Why? For their mental health and to connect to something spiritual that we
Mhm.
get, right? Whatever that is. For me, it's, all phenomena. It's out here, when we go up to the mountains, and I get up there and I tear. It's so beautiful. Mother Earth is, especially being in the land of Native Americans. We are at near a UNESCO site, the Taos Pueblo, and then
Mm.
all around, the energy that emanates from the ground here is so special. And not until when I did that Pechakucha talk, which come all together for me about this, the emotional, neurological combination of things when we run and how it quiets everything down.
Yeah, I think that the anxiety, just in general, anxiety really weighs on us when running. I found that today I went for a run, and I was even just this idea of stopping and looking at what's around you and remembering why we run and why we trail run and being thankful for the nature that we're allowed to enjoy is,
Mm.
I mean, I've been, this is terrible. I've been running and listening to the CNN live stream of the elections. And I realized, like, halfway through my run today, I was like, what am I doing to myself and why?
Yep.
It's like, I think this a lot. And kind of to your point, too, about this, when you're talking about when you were younger, you smoked a lot of marijuana and you were drinking, kind of, in not realizing that not only is that numbing your feelings, but alcohol is also a depressant. Sometimes I think about this is a totally different conversation, but I often think about my own relationship to alcohol as a runner. It's like you do these two things where I exercise because that's positive for me, but then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you have a glass of wine or you have this and you realize, like, oh, this is a depressant, so what am I,
Mm-hmm.
am I undoing this work? Anyway, it's just sort of, it's a little bit of a tangent, but I
No,
think
I
a
think
lot
that's
of times
important.
these days where we're feeling slow on our run or feeling sluggish, sometimes it's hard to understand how much of this is my body and how much of this is my mind. How much of this is the anxiety that I'm running to combat, or the depression that I'm running to combat. At least for me, that's
Well, yeah, again, I think we bounce around a lot in our heads, and I do. Uh, I carry I carry music with me only for if I cannot get rid of the thoughts while I'm running. I
that's
plug it in.
interesting.
It's the other thing I think that's so important about trail running that I'll never put my feet on a road race again, ever. Nothing against people who do that. But the community is so important. And
Yeah.
here's what's happening during COVID, my take. It's all about loss. We've all lost something, even if we don't know somebody. It's all about our loss of freedom to move around. In New Mexico, we're in another crisis. We're running out of beds with other people, and it brings me back to community. This talking with you right now is community. I can hear like tears in my eyes that you are interested enough in me and what I do and actually got it. Because most people go, oh, he runs and he paints. And then I go, no, go look at the videos and see. It's more than that. I just want you to know what I'm doing and why I do it. After I did the public presentation, kind of like a TED talk, people came up to me with tears and go, I've suffered depression all my life. That has helped me so much. And that to me is the most important thing, is that I can actually help somebody else that's suffering.
Yeah.
It's such a joy to be able to say, God, most people just say, I want to remove 5 years of my life that was painful. I go, no, you don't. You wouldn't be where you are today if you remove those 5 years. This is so necessary. Challenges and suffering are part of life. It's like, this is that we're looking at challenging and suffering as benefits to turn into benefits is, God, finally got it. I always thought it's like only about feeling good all the time. It's not.
Oh,
So, but the but
that's a really interesting point. About I have never really thought about it that like that, kind of looking at these periods of life in which we suffer. Like, it's not about blocking it out or blacking it out, and being like, oh, I
mm-mm,
just don't remember this, but it's about
mm-hmm,
recognizing it and processing it afterwards. And I think as trail runners, I think a lot of us trail run because we're processing either an event or we're processing some years of our life. Some people know, but maybe it's just a feeling, but I do feel that within the trail running community, there are a lot more conversations about things like this. Like, why did you start trail running? A lot of people started trail running because they were battling depression, because they were battling addiction, because they were processing trauma. I mean, I think that obviously within the road running community, that exists too. I think a lot of people run for the
yes.
health benefits, but I think especially within the trail running community, and I really like that point, that looking at something negative that has happened or is happening is also a part of the process, and
Yeah.
we won't get to the next place unless we process the thing that is happening or has happened. That really sticks with me.
Well, I want to go back also to the community thing. I think it's really important to encourage one another in the community right now. I wanted community and camaraderie. Um, I didn't want to be with alpha males all the time. I want to be in a loving, supporting, not competitive. There's nothing wrong with being competitive. I think, especially I have to be competitive with myself and challenge myself. And I want a partner and I want friends that challenge me as a human being, especially. Is the Vert running community, are your runners that know each other? Do you call each other once a day or once a week and go, how are you doing? And this is what's important. I realize my job on earth is not to get the calls, it's to give the calls.
Bruce, something you touched on just there, I think, is something I also wanted to ask you about. This idea of kind of slowing down, or the idea that we're really like obviously we're super attached to our screens and to our computers, and it's just become a part of our world and a part of our lives at this point. Do you find that painting while you're trail running, and I assume the answer is yes, but I'd love to hear more about what it produces within you. Do you feel that helps you to really slow down and much more notice what's around you and more appreciate the nature that we're privileged to run in and spend time in? I ask this
Absolutely.
because I started at one point. I'm not a talented sketcher, drawer, or painter by any means, but a few years ago I started just on the weekends. I would sit in a place, not even necessarily in nature, but even in town, and I would just sketch something. And the reason I started doing it wasn't to produce the sketch, it was to actually try to just focus on one thing and just really observe something, or really observe my surroundings for a period of like an hour. And I found that for me, not regardless of what was produced, that wasn't important. For me, it was a really interesting exercise in realizing that there are huge benefits in slowing down long enough to just really observe the thing that's in front of you. So I'm just wondering, I sort of think that the answer is probably yes, that you feel that as well, but I'm just wondering if you can maybe describe a little bit for us what that produces within you.
Well, my wife, who has tolerated me for 34 years, but she'll say to me, when you're drawing, you are in your highest self. She said, I love to watch you draw. And of course, as soon as I see her watching me, I'm out of that. It is that focus. It's that Zen thing again, that we're in the flow. Very impressionistic and abstract, and you'll see a lot of energy. And well, I hope you see a lot of energy in my painting. But the drawing aspect, to allow myself, it is a decision. Listen, having hope is a decision. It's not something you're born with or not. I'm going to be hopeful today. That's a decision. That's all it is. Why focus on the things you don't want? Focus on the things you do want. How many times do you go, I don't want that. I don't want to live for it. I don't want that. It's like, well, why would you even consider it? Focus on what you do want.
That really hits home for me. Yeah, continue. But yeah, that's super spot on. Okay.
Yeah. So, yes.
Things like unlocking artistic abilities and running, because it's so true. People say this about ultra running and trail running all the time. It's 80% mental, 90% mental, and that's really interesting, because I never thought about it from this perspective where, yeah, completely, we limit ourselves by saying, I can't draw, I'm not a painter, I'm not artistic, I'm not creative. And by limiting exactly what you're saying, like, instead of choosing to see the negatives, instead of thinking, what don't I want? I don't want this, I don't want that. Exactly. What if we thought, okay, what could I be, or what am I, or what do I not know yet? That's a super good point.
What also helped me in running too is that I try and look at things from this moment forward. Looking in the past of how I got here is important, but I tend to look at now from this moment forward. Those past things or mistakes, I tend to look at them as lessons learned. And of course, we need to look back on a training plan and say what worked for me, what didn't. But I like to look at where am I going right now? I loved bathing in misery. I mean, that was a great bath, but it didn't do any cleaning, right? And when we're down, we want other people to come down with us. We don't want a helping hand. Screw you. You're too happy. I want you to be miserable with me.
I mean, I'm going to just take a look through here. And I think actually I just have one main question left that I would really like us to touch on before we finish up, because I think that we've kind of done different topics, but to me, I think it's way more interesting to kind of just organically follow the conversation and see where things go. But the thing, and I'll just read this aloud and we can finish with this, but so I'd like to, basically, you have this quote in your video, which is called Running Out of Depression, Painting a New Life, which really stuck with me. And the quote, which I'll read for the people who will watch this, is the quote from Bruce. I found that the more intense the run, which for me is 10 miles or longer, the more work I accomplished and the freer I became both artistically and spiritually, both on the trails and in the studio. That freedom led me up new trails where I explored different painting, filming, and yes, also running techniques. So my question for you, or the thought that I kind of have here is, I think that many of us get really hung up on races, kind of like we talked about earlier today, or in this year, the lack of races. So the cancellation or the taking away of a race. I've heard that kind of just over and over and over again in the trail running community this year. And I think that we often forget why we train in the first place or why we trail run in the first place. So can you expand a little bit on this quote for us that I've just read for everybody? So I just would love to hear you expand on this, because I think that especially this year, all of us in the trail running community could just use a little bit of a reminder of the wonder that's hiding behind every trail run, and how lucky we are to be able to experience the nature that we do.
The things that happen, again, as far as the neuroscience goes with that, we know as runners, when we do something, we're expanding our brain. As we go downhill, we make nanosecond decisions without knowing it, avoiding that rock, that branch. We create neuroplasticity, which is something that's really, really good, especially as you get older. I just know that, you know, the mountains and the earth, the plants, the beings, the brother rock, you know, sister trees, the cloud, all of that, we're a part of. I'm a part of that. I am a microcosm, part of this macrocosm. And when I run, we're in it. When I paint it and capture it my way, you are in a box. When I get out there, I'm creating divergent. I'm able to think in a creative, less linear way. So we tend in training, I know in training, it is a linear way. There's progressions. We measure things. And again, I'm not a training expert. I just know what works for me to get stronger and faster, if that's a goal. And it also, it was a very long, hard decision when I said, I'm not doing races anymore. Putting pen to paper or pencil to paper or paint or dancing will only enhance your running. There's no way that it can't. It's impossible. And here's the other thing, when I run, I carry pen and paper with me, or I record onto my phone. I have so many ideas and solutions, right? And solutions to problems that I couldn't figure out. So that spiritually, by the way, the closer I am, when I get even just here, you know, I'm up, like the mountains are a little bit back there, and these are just foothills. The higher ones are behind me here. But as soon as I get up this horse trail here, and I'm in the pines and all the different species of trees, it's like a loving embrace. And I just feel really held in the mountains. So that's what it does for me.
Yeah. You know, that's a really great point, Bruce. I love this idea that the arts, regardless of what that is, if that's dance, if that's painting, if that's photography, if that's writing, if that's poetry, whatever it is, all that can do is enhance your running. And I really love the connection that you've made between creativity and athleticism. And I think that's what really just has drawn me to your work and what made me want to learn more about what you do in general, because we don't often talk about that. You know, we tend to look at ourselves and introduce ourselves, or expect of other people to be kind of just what is the word? You know, just
chromatic.
Yeah, yes. You know, and this is a conversation I've actually had with other trail runners too, this idea that, or especially professional athletes in the trail running world, this idea that you feel like you have to present yourself as this one-sided thing, you know, but at the end of the day, even if you look at the three of us behind Vert, like I'm a professional photographer, so that's my background. Moises is an engineer, and Max is also an engineer, you know, so we all have these kind of different components of ourselves, and we're not, I think, especially with social media and stuff, there's this idea to present yourself as this is who I am and market it hard, you know, but that's not the reality of human beings. We're complex. And I think that leaning into those complexities and nourishing them like you've done with painting and trail running, I think can only yield positive things, which I think is
there are a lot of like musicians who paint. Jim Carrey paints. If you look at, I was looking at a runner yesterday that actually started following because of your post, Pascal. I think he's in Switzerland, which I love. Great. Yeah, we tried to move there. I look at him. I think his video that Dina Fit produced is really slick and nice, and he's writing music. But I think he's studying climatology and
Yeah,
ice movement. And I was like,
he
okay,
very
I'm not just
frequently is like on expeditions on glaciers and stuff. He's a super dynamic
the
individual.
other thing
He's
I wanted to
really
think about too is how this trail running has helped. I have fought and fought my whole life. Since the 1950s, the end of World War II, we have become so mechanistic in society.
mm,
You sit down and you make widgets. Now we just do computers.
yeah,
And why do we do it? So we can in the States, so we can have health insurance, so we can have a big house, so then we can buy the big house. I'm like, but that you can't take any of it with you,
yeah.
and that's not my understanding of what success and happiness is. It is not, nowhere near. Not that I don't need to be sheltered, but next year, and this idea came to me while I was running after listening to radio, we're going to build a house that's only going to cost $50. We're going to do hugelkulturs, which people in Europe know,
Mm,
that you never water, you never replant. We're going to create our own power through glass.
mm.
And like that came through an idea while running anyway.
That's cool. Um, okay, Bruce, for me, I am out of time for today, but I just want to leave everybody with so basically what I'm going to do is I'll write up some of Bruce's answers. And I think, Bruce, you may have filled in some stuff before. You can send it over. I'll
Mm-hmm.
put this up on our website in the form of a blog post with a
Okay.
link to this conversation that we're having right now. And I will include, but I also would love to just close with, if anyone's interested in your work, I think the best way it sounds like for them to get in contact with you is via email. Is that right?
Yeah, email's the best. Or
Cool.
then go to the website, which, by the way, I'm redoing the website, the store and everything, but the website or Bruce at brucekatlincreates.com
Awesome.
is a good
Yeah.
way. Or an Instagram, either way.
Cool. Yeah. And your Instagram has some really great examples, both of your process and of your work itself. So if anyone hasn't already gone over and checked out Bruce's Instagram, you should definitely go over there. Yeah. Bruce, thank you so much. Again, this has
Yeah,
been
take
real.
care.
Okay.
All
Bye.
right, bye-bye. Bye all. Thank you.